Mr. Brady Kelley, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So I want to know if, what would you consider to be your most unusual productivity habit that one might be surprised to find about you?
Productivity habit. Um, I don't know if it's a productivity habit or not, but I am a list maker. In fact, I'm afraid sometimes my list making causes me to be less productive than I should. But if I turn my computer screen around here, you'd see a number of little notepads and sticky notes and you name it. I'm a note taker just to keep myself organized and to get my stuff crossed off the list.
Do you have lists for your lists, or you're not to that point yet?
That was my point about the non-productive side of that. I think I do. I'm
Uh,
trying to knock that off.
all right. Well, then let me ask you this then. What's the one that you could not do without? What's the one that anchors you the most?
Productivity wise,
Yeah. I mean, what's the list that if you did not make this list, you would not function as a human being anymore?
probably more personal. Just the things to take care of personally that if I don't write them down, they're not going to get done.
Probably helps keep those marital squabbles to a minimum too, I would imagine.
That's the point.
All right, Brady. Well, let's dive in a little more focused on what it is that you do professionally. And I'm kind of curious, from where you sit, what do you think agents need to be paying attention to? What kind of lists should they be making in terms of their agency, where business is going, where should their attention be focused right now?
Well, that's a good question because I think they probably are focused on a lot of different things right now. I think we all are, but I would say the most important thing for agents to be thinking about or keeping at the top of their list is staying connected with their policyholders. Working with those folks through the COVID-19 impacts that they and all of us are facing. Since all of this kind of started into February, early March, almost every state has issued some form of policyholder accommodation due to the pandemic, be it allowing deferments of payments, or in some cases states are recommending the return of premium for lower risk during stay-at-home orders and that type of thing. And so there's a ton to pay attention to. I think so long as agents are paying close attention to that state guidance and doing their best to comply with that, I think that's another key thing. I would say one last thing for any agent who's dealing with a unique policyholder impact or the unusual, the very complex type of risk, I would just make sure that those agents are closely connected to a wholesale expert. Our members, that's what they do. They're wholesale brokers, underwriters that are extremely experienced in the most complex type of risk underwriting. And so if there's an agent out there that doesn't have that type of wholesale access, wholesale relationship, they should get one.
What would you maybe think is the biggest misconception when it comes to wholesaling that, maybe an agent that dabbles here or there that doesn't put a ton of their business in that direction? Where do you think they may be misinformed, or is there something that they're just not maybe looking closely enough at?
I think oftentimes, being in this segment now for 9 years, early on in my career, I heard a lot of commentary around, the addition of a wholesaler to a transaction will increase the cost of the transaction. I guess it makes sense structurally that would appear to be the case. What we did as an association, now almost 5 years ago, believe it or not, we had Conning study the facts around that. We actually developed two composites, a composite of insurance companies that distribute on a standard, basis, and a non-wholesale basis, and companies that basically distribute their product generally, predominantly through the wholesale network. And so they took those statutory annual statements, compared the cost ratios between the two composites, and they found that the wholesale composite, insurers leveraging a wholesale network, actually spent about 100 basis points less in producing the transaction than the other. And so when we set out to do that study, we never anticipated that the answer would be that wholesale is actually less expensive. We were hopeful it would be that wholesale and retail would be about equivalent. In fact, we found wholesale was cheaper. So I think that's a tremendous misconception, and one that if it's driving an agent not to use a wholesaler, I think it's a bad misconception.
And we all love to talk about price and what it does and who's getting paid what, where, and when. Is there, in terms of just adding to the cost or reducing the cost, do you think that it's really more about specialization, that when you come to the wholesale market, that it's just you're really going to get something that is really just zeroed in on that particular thing, where the big box players will say they have to play a little bit more of a wider game.
Oh, I think that's key part of it. I would say, in addition to that, the wholesaler is going to get that producer, that retail agent, access to very stable capital, a very stable market. That on their own they might not have access to. So I think there's a laundry list of reasons why that retail agent would want to use a wholesaler. A lot of times they can't solve the problem for their client. They may not get the client what they want, but they may not be able to solve the problem in the way the client needs without kind of the customized solution a wholesaler can help them craft.
When we're looking at those different solutions, how do you think we can kind of continue to push the independent channel forward, right? How can organizations like yours really help agents to do something, I don't necessarily different, but just help them facilitate business in a way that is more meaningful to their end customer?
Just to kind of sum up, I think the conversation we've been having, I would encourage them. I think they can push themselves forward by making sure that a retailer who doesn't have access to a wholesale relationship now, that they consider developing one. I think that the expertise, the capital, the access that the wholesaler can bring the independent agent will help them, solve their clients' problems, and long term, I think, help them retain clients.
Have you seen any sort of, this is completely off the cuff, Brady, I'm curious, have you seen any sort of statistics in terms of that retention as to when a wholesale product is in the mix versus not, potentially, of helping that retention?
I don't have any facts to support that, Joey. We don't have data that would say that adding that wholesaler would improve the retailer's retention, but certainly anecdotally we hear it all the time.
Yeah.
We hear that from a number of our members who say their retail partners rely on them to find the solution and help them retain that client.
Yeah, just in my conversations with agents over the years, they always have this they've always painted a picture per se as to what they go to certain markets for, and I'm always kind of curious as to where they develop those certain biases, if it's just inherent legacy sort of training or whatever. But yeah, I'm always interested as to what can be done to help agents kind of think a little bit differently, right? To experience and place the business really in the most effective way possible. Speaking of that business being placed, where do you see it moving? Is there some opportunity right now that agents maybe not be paying the most attention to, or is there something that they really should start to really zero in on because it's going to be pivotal moving forward?
I say this often in response to a question like that. I'm oftentimes not the best person to ask that question of. It's more our members who would be best equipped to answer that question of any missed opportunity in the market, lines of business or otherwise. But I think one of the risks that we're very interested in monitoring is where things go with pandemic risk. Obviously the last 3 months have highlighted the need to be pretty serious about a long-term solution there. And we're monitoring a number of proposals now, some at the state level, a few at the federal level, that would address how we manage pandemic risk going forward. So I would say that's the line that I would assume some opportunity for the private industry will come out of. Again, there's a variety of proposals. There's one that would create a private-public partnership to address the pandemic, much like the TRIA program helps us address terrorism risk. There are some nuances and differences, obviously, but that program is modeled after TRIA. And there's another proposal, if not multiple proposals, that will say pandemic risk is uninsurable. There are some dramatic differences between the types of proposals out there today. I think where we land with how best to manage the risk and provide consumers who are now probably more heightened now than ever to that being a real risk they're going to have to mitigate. It'll be interesting to see where some of this goes. We think something between a completely public solution and a public-private solution that doesn't provide the industry with a nice limit on how much exposure they would have, something in between those two will likely be the right solution, we think, going forward.
What kind of conversations do you think that kind of trickles down for the agents to have with their clients. I mean, what would you be telling, your members to, how to handle these discussions in terms of preparing them for what's happening? Is there any sort of preliminary discussions that they think that should be going on right now?
I think that for those who are dealing with clients who are saying, how do I manage this? How do I manage this? What somewhat feels like a limitless exposure to me and perhaps my business. I think it's right now best to do education. We're not sure where pandemic risk programs are going to land. So it's not easy to answer the question in many facts right now, but just to educate clients about what these proposals are, where they may go. I think that type of education will help agents, inform and make their clients more comfortable that something will come forth at some point. I'd like to say it's a risk that our market would be, willing to step up and support. I should clarify, they already do. I mean, there are products for pandemic today. I think the percentage of them that actually address a pandemic like what we've been through is pretty darn small. I think there will be capacity in our segment for this. To what degree is the unknown. But if ever there are going to be, crafty solutions, innovative solutions around pandemic, I think it'll be in the wholesale, specialty, and surplus line segment.
You said something that was really interesting in the sense of, at least just if you don't know, saying that you don't know, right? Having that sort of reassurance of like, listen, we're like keeping an eye on it. How many times do you think agents maybe forego kind of giving that intermittent kind of update to like say, well, I got to wait till I have all the information? Because I know in my years across the industry, that tends to be sometimes that analysis by paralysis sort of thing where they don't want to say anything until they have everything, but yet that still doesn't create a very reassuring environment.
Well, especially right now, I think the more facts and answers we try and provide right now, when we all know that there are few, that's a problem. That's a concerning environment, at least in my opinion. So I think it's perfectly fine to say we really don't know, and I get pretty good at saying that because oftentimes I don't know the right answer. But we don't know, certainly with pandemic, where this is going, and I think it's fine and fair to say that and educate clients around the potential solutions going forward.
All right, Brady, I got two more questions for you. And we've kind of talked a lot about, across the industry, but I kind of want to drill it down a little more specifically to home for you in terms of, your organization, what you're doing. Is there something that you guys are doing or you think is important to kind of help push, kind of insurance, the industry, the agent channel forward? How do you think that, you guys kind of play a role in all of that?
Well, a key service that we provide, Joey, is advocacy. So when it comes to all of the state and federal legislative changes and responses that I referred to earlier, our job is really to promote the market, make sure lawmakers understand what the market's all about, make sure they understand how important this is to the overall economy and helping manage through crises like these, but also to protect the market. Make sure lawmakers and regulators aren't making changes that will disrupt its ability to do just that. Do what it does, help consumers solve problems and deal with catastrophes. And so I would say, we're not in the business of trying to change insurance. Quite honestly, I would say our segment, the way it works and operates today, I don't know that I would have a list of things to change. But we're constantly promoting, protecting, advocating on behalf of our members. And that's a key thing that we do. Like I said, after probably mid to late March, I think there's less than a handful of states now that haven't issued some type of guidance recommending how insurance companies and insurance brokers, agents respond to the pandemic. And as strong as the state system is, we're very strong supporters of the state-based system of regulation. Many of them, in the right way, they're responding to protect their consumers, but they respond sometimes in a very inconsistent way. And so timeframes for deferring payment can vary. And in these bulletins and the guidance we've seen so far, they can vary pretty dramatically. And so, our role is to try and make sure where that's happening, there's as much consistency and uniformity as possible. And that, again, regulators understand the impacts of the things that they're doing. And we're working together to improve that where we can. That's a key key service of ours, and I think it's one that's been pretty beneficial so far to members since all of this started.
All right, Brady, last question for you, sir. I don't know if you have a list for this, but if you do, I definitely want the thing that's at the top of it. And I want to know more specifically from your perspective, the thing that is most exciting to you in terms of, where insurance is going, what you think is possible, not just, we hear about a bunch of different things that, what could happen, what might happen, but what's the thing that's right around the corner for you and your perspective that's going to have the biggest impact on the way things are going to go?
Maybe I'll answer that question more generally. Kind of come back to specifically what's around the corner. I need to think about that for a second. But generally speaking, what excites me about this segment and current environment is that I think that this segment has been in a significant period of growth, and I'm pretty confident it's going to continue to be. Not knowing what the pandemic might do to impact that, I've talked with a number of members. Our board is comprised of 16 members of some of the most successful firms in the country, largest to smallest. The optimism I'm hearing from them in terms of growth and submission rates and perhaps even business flowing from the standard market to the E&S market, that borderline business that's now moving into the E&S space, I'm pretty optimistic we're going to continue to see significant growth in 2020. That's what I'm excited about.
All right, Brady, I appreciate the time, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joey. I appreciate your time. Appreciate the opportunity.